No, you don't want it.
All right, this is the June 19th, 2022 meeting of the Node.js Loaders team. We had on the agenda the discussion about renaming our team from Loaders to Hooks or something else, and likewise potentially renaming the API or the command line flag. We just before this meeting decided to punt the other item on the agenda, the supporting TypeScript without vendoring it discussion, because in that thread, Matteo, the author of the thread, just asked the Next 10 team to handle it. So we're gonna skip that for now. But kind of branching off of it was the question of node configuration, which was discussed as like a comment in that thread and was discussed in an issue on the loaders team, loader configuration. So I'll add this to the well, it's really about configuring Node itself if we want to do that. So,
so about that, so I think there are several ways to do it. Maybe not all of them are possible, but just to brainstorm. So we could either have it like the command line flag, which is global. So when you start the node process, you define the loaders, or it could be maybe package scope. So like when you put type module in your package and all the JS files under it use type module. Maybe we could have if loaders is defined for a package, only this package use the loaders, or is it just not realistic?
So a few years ago when we were working on ESM stuff, there was a lot of discussion of what we were calling per package loaders. So that was like, imagine you write whatever, Lodash, as a library, and you want to say you wrote it in TypeScript, and so you don't want to, for whatever reason, you want to just like ship the TypeScript to Node and have Node run those. So you want to like somehow tell Node, hey, register the TypeScript loader before you run the files in my folder, or in my package. And so that was the idea behind a per package loader. The short version is that idea basically got rejected for, I think, a variety of reasons, but one of the biggest, I think, was just performance, was because it was like, we kind of wanted to, we wanted NPM authors to like ship runnable code. We don't want like everyone to be shipping all sorts of things, JSX, who knows what, and then like, in your typical, Node app that's got 1,000 dependencies could have, 2,000 loaders running, and that'll just like ground the process to a halt. So we decided that that was just not a good feature to support of like a per package loader. And then I think by extension, we wouldn't want per package configuration either. Many of these things are like controlling the node process itself, which doesn't make much sense. Like there's no way to apply that just to a package. So I think at least at first, we could always extend in that direction if we just discover the need to, I think. But at least at first, knowing that history, I would say, like, there is always exactly one entry point. There's always exactly one package.json file, if any, 1 or 0, I guess, controlling that entry point in terms of like you know, the nearest parent package.json, if you're looking for, like, say, the type field, you know, there's never more than one of those files. So that could be like where we put configuration, and it controls the node process that runs that entry point.
Maybe package.json is not the right place if we already use it for different things. You know what I mean?
So, I mean, I think like this idea,
confusing.
there's some merit into putting, especially if it's more than just loaders, to group all the config under a namespace for sure. That's probably a good idea.
So
there is the precedent of the like policies file, which is a separate file. The counter argument though is that we are already searching for and reading package.json files like all across your, you know, your hard disk essentially. Like if you're in like an app folder, we're looking for app.package.json, and then app/node modules/ everything under that /package.json. We're looking for all those package.jsons anyway right now to find the type fields. So
we stop at the first package.json we encounter.
Well, no, for every dependency, we have to. Well, yes, I mean, in terms of like, in terms of searching up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it depends.
When you start the process, you only look for one.
No, well, it depends what you're using. So like if you're using own files, then it uses the closest one to the own file. But then if you're importing some dependency, then it will try to find that one's. And then if it can't find that one's, then it will use own.
Yeah, but when you start a process, it's not gonna try to recurse all your file system until it reaches the root to know how to load your file.
It'll stop once it finds one. Yeah. Anyway, all I was trying to say though was that if we put this inside package.json, then that might be a good way to do it, because that's not a performance hit. It's not like searching for and potentially loading yet another file.
And I think
if we're only searching for and loading one other file only for the entry point, then, you know, looking for one file next to an entry point is a trivial lookup. But, you know, that's the advantage of package.json.
I think it also makes sense because loads of packages already use package.json as a dumbing ground. Like you can dump your Mocha configuration, your Jest configuration in there. So it's like, cool. Like that's already a thing.
But it's really not for the same thing though.
No?
I mean, I think like if you think about like, how are people doing this today? I mean, that's what I wrote down here somewhere. Like the scripts field in package.json today is the de facto, here are the flags to run my app with, because you're defining the commands to run your app. So for me, this would feel like the most logical place based on current practice today and like historical precedent of like a Babel field in a package.json and so on and so forth. But we could also have it be a separate file. I mean, especially if it needs to be JavaScript rather than JSON, then that argues for it being a separate file.
So I guess what we should be asking is, should we support .env? Because it would do what we want and more, and that's already also what's doing Bun.
I noticed like when the whole Bun like thing came out, like one of its like top line features so that it has built-in support for .env, and I was thinking to myself, why doesn't Node just add that to core? Like I didn't bother searching for it to see if someone had proposed it over the years, because I feel like certainly someone must have mentioned it, but
I'm not sure. But because if we put node options in .env, voila, you have your,
then you have the configuration.
Config. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like maybe there's some security concern about that.
it needs to be deactivable for sure, but
Needs to be what?
You have to be able to,
you need to turn it on and off for security.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's definitely something we should look into. That could be the easiest solution than having to define a, file format and blah, 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 schema, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like,
Yeah, and it's also useful for other stuff.
Hmm.
To,
yeah, it covers configuration beyond Node for sure.
I like both options because like I tend to just put all of my stuff into package JSON. So if that was an option, I would choose that one as a consumer. The like command line options for me is like if I have to.
We could also do both. I mean, or start with one, because I could
Yeah.
see people wanting to have some separation of like .env is truly for like environment variables that are environment specific, whereas
Yeah, exactly. Like
a
if it's something
JSON
I want-
file is
That's
for
what
like
I'm suggesting,
configuration that's like consistent with the app.
yeah, like something I
Yeah.
want to change. So like it's going to do this in production, it's going to do this in dev, or like there's some kind of secret that is specific to the development environment or specific to the, so like it doesn't really seem the place to add this sort of stuff. You could. And also I really would like for Node to support like .env things natively. But yeah, I would rather have it in a package JSON because it's like, cool, it's right there. We're already looking at it. It's very conventionally used for this sort of thing. Cool. If it ain't broke.
Yeah, but it also doesn't exist while the environment variable is already there.
Sorry, what doesn't exist?
We don't have anything in package JSON to configure loaders.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So what's practical
porting-
about .env?
But porting it
it's
over
already
would be
there.
trivial.
Well, I mean, we have to agree on what syntax to use, what name also, because
I think it should be a
it's at stake now.
one. Take your kebab case and snake case it. That's like what everybody does. If we did something different, then I think we would need a very good reason to not.
Yeah, but we don't know yet what the name of the flag will be. We're talking about changing that.
Well, okay, sure, yeah.
So-
Well, we can still, that's a set, we can figure that.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
take
a-
one topic at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for jest in jest config, you have -- watch. When you add that to package JSON, it's just watch true. So like these conventions are very well established. We should just follow them. And like I don't see any particular reason to not do that.
I mean, I guess my question is like, for all these things, Node's been around for 10 years. How come this hasn't happened by now? Because like, you don't get to this many command line options without someone being like, hey, is there some way to do a config file instead of passing a dozen flags?
Is it possible just nobody asked? Like everyone assumed that someone else asked and it was shot down?
Well, of course it's always possible, but like, I mean, I don't know. I haven't searched through the history. Antoine, do you want to be the champion of looking into this and coming up with a proposal?
Yeah. I mean, I can link it to it. I'm just should we decide on a syntax to use, or
like how do we convert the command line options to command line flags to package JSON?
I mean, I would just, it would just be all these things, and
well, probably only the ones allowed in Node options, I would assume.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah. And they would just be camel cased, and like like Antoine was saying, if it's just a flag that's on or off, then it's like,
Brilliant.
you know, it's just that true. I mean, maybe dash help doesn't make sense, but like, you know, the thing with true, and if it's or true or false, and then if it's something that accepts arguments like loader does, where's loader? Experimental loader.
Experimental loader.
Yeah, so then it's just like colon, and then it's an array of strings, and that's it. And then you would be in a node namespace or Node.js, I don't know, namespace inside package.json. And so we, like, when we find on startup, node's given the entry point. Once it has that entry point, it starts the process of finding the package.json that's the nearest parent for that entry point. And then this is where we inject this little bit of extra logic of like, oh, once you find that package.json, you have to read to look for this config object if it's there, you know, apply it. And that will be the really hard part, because the node process is already running at this point. So
it's already doing exactly
you'll have
that
to
check, because it's using it to read the type property from package JSON, and it happens.
Yeah, but that doesn't change like how the node process itself runs, you know.
But
so we probably need to have first support for dynamic loader injection, like runtime injection.
We don't need to worry about that yet, because it hasn't read any of these things yet. So when it's doing like should use ESM loader or whatever it is, it hasn't instantiated the ESM loader instance and hasn't populated the various loader collections. So if we add this little bit here, we could read them and append them to Node's existing collection of loaders. So if you specify some by a command line, those are already there. And then we say, okay, cool, now we've read package JSON, here are these things, smush.
Yeah,
well, for loaders,
that could work
but
for
like,
loaders.
But I'm saying, like, I
I'm
think
not
if we're going to
sure.
do this, we want to support most of our config options.
Really
I
not
think
realistic.
I think this should use ESM loader happens very, very early in Node. I'd have to check for certain, but I think this happens before most things happen.
Well, okay, but JavaScript is already running at this point, so it's
yes,
clearly
well,
later than
the entry point script isn't running yet.
Yeah, only
Node hasn't even decided like to treat it as ESM or CommonJS yet, because it's looking for the type field. So we're still like very early in the startup process, but the process is running. It just hasn't. It's somewhere between this, the process started up and started running user entry code. But I'm assuming the current logic in there for like parsing command line arguments and stuff, that's all like C++ logic that happens extremely early. So
yeah,
it is. But for loaders, it could work. So we could start with that.
Well,
maybe
but like you might want to like, before you introduce this feature of like define node configuration via files, you should know that it's going to be possible for most of the collection of things that people use to configure Node with, not just like one or two, because that's it's gonna feel like a bug to users if like, well, why can I put -- loader in this block but not no warning?
Would you rather not have it at all, or
yeah, exactly.
have it work only for loaders?
But
I don't think I can do both at once. we have to start small.
Yes, I'm wondering if what is allowed.
I'm just thinking that like other people might object to it if it's that small, you know, or at least that small without at least a plan for how you're going to support the bulk of the things.
Well, what I'm wondering if node options is already the subset of things that we can do this way.
Could be.
Because I imagine there's a particular reason beyond security.
Well, here's that subset, which is you know, a
Not
lot
so
of
subtle.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm wondering if those were chosen for reasons beyond security, that like we can do this after Node has started.
I'm just saying, like, you should investigate that a little bit. Even if the first version of it only supports loaders, like maybe these are all things that can be changed at runtime, or at least changed after initial bootstrap, but before user code evaluation.
Mm.
You know, and then that's how you do it. One of the things that came up, the VTest team, when I asked them what their like wish list was they wanted to be able to change dash conditions at runtime, which I was like, well,
they can't. You can
I
change
don't-
that in Loader.
yeah, but I mean, they mean like at runtime, like after the process is already started up, after user code is already executed.
But that's in the Loader roadmap, right? To have
You can already do it.
an API for that.
Hey, if you can already do it, then great. I wasn't aware. they didn't
Well, I
seem
mean-
to be aware that it was possible. But
You can
anyway,
read the
this
package
is what I'm
yourself.
saying is like, you know, is it possible to toggle enable source maps on or off long after the application has started running?
Yeah, you
You
can
know?
change many of these things. You'll just end up with inconsistent behavior during the life of the process. So like it won't happen for some stuff, and then you turn it on and then it starts happening. So it's like maybe not a good idea.
Anyway, I'm just
You
saying that's
can-
another option for how to handle this, is make more of these mutable at runtime. All right, before we run out of time, why don't we, so Antoine, if you want to tackle that, I would love for you to do it. I was thinking of, if I have time, trying to look into I'm working on those helper functions. I was gonna take your advice and start with just these. And I don't know how soon I'm gonna do that. I assume, Jacob, this is your next item?
I'm currently adding, well, both adding and tidying up ESM tests, converting them
Okay.
from synchronous. I think I'll finish that probably this weekend. And then I was planning to tackle some of those other helpers, but if we only want to focus on the first two and you've got those, then I think it would make sense to tackle the off-threading next.
Yeah, I'm not sure how relevant these are to off thread. Like, I don't know why one would depend on the other.
I'm just thinking it might be, I might need to consume them.
Well, they already exist internally. This is
No,
this effort is just making them available like as a public API.
Yes. So I can invoke the resolver from that bit, but I don't know if I need to call out to those things again. And if it's because I don't really know how this is going to work yet for the offloading stuff. And I'm thinking that if I need to like selectively look up something from package.json, I don't know why, but I might, that it would be better if they were abstracted or extracted rather than having to like run through resolve to get some stuff.
Well, I mean, they should all be in the like module cache and all that. So it should be like, you should like in the internal code base, I think you have more than everything that you need already without needing any new helpers. But yeah, if you need something, we can
like,
figure it out. So.
Inside of resolve, there is a private function that gets a whole bunch of information from package.json, and then resolve only consumes like 2 properties from what it returns. And I don't know if I potentially need to access more of the other properties that it also provides. I just don't have access to them when it's a private function inside of resolve.
Okay. All right. Anyway, yeah. So, by the way, Guy Bedford knows a lot about this and is happy to help
Oh,
if and when you
okay.
get started working on that, so I'd reach out to him. So the other thing, rename loaders to hooks. So I guess between the three of us, where do we feel about this, or what do we think we should do?
I think it makes sense. And like, I was thinking about async hooks and performance hooks and stuff. I think we just say like, sure, fine. They're already called that, whatever. We all internally know. It doesn't really matter what other people outside of Node think of it. And then the Node flag, sure, hooks is fine. Like you would never use an async hook or, well, not never, but you basically would not really use an async or a performance hook inside of that, and it wouldn't be used in the same way. So I think it's safe. Like it just happens to have a similar name.
I mean, it's unfortunate to let it happen if we can avoid it. Unless
To let
we
a
can find
confusing
anything.
name happen, you mean?
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of one of the later comments I put on here was like, we'll call the flag like register or something like that.
Doesn't
And
it already exist? Isn't that what -r is?
that's require. I mean, maybe that's not the best name either. We could also do like -- plugin. I mean, I don't know. Like there are other options.
Yeah.
But like I'm just saying, like we could pick some name for the flag. It's not necessarily the same name as like the API. Like we could call this the hooks API or the customization hooks API or something like that. And that's what it's called in the docs, but then the flag is this or -- hooks or whatever.
yeah. I think if we end up with a confusing name, we might as well keep loader and name it loader/hooks internally.
I don't want to keep
Because-
loaders though, because it's like
Yeah.
there's so many things that we need to support that have nothing to do with loading.
Yeah.
You know,
and name
like
loader-
tab completion in the REPL, that has nothing to do with loading. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the name loader is already
Will
configured.
the flag? Will the flag be useful for the tab completion in the REPL?
Yeah, because like think about what we have now is like this is a loader. Well, the first two lines at least. This is an existing like loader file. So that, you know, say we add support for customizing REPL tab completion. So that it would be like export async function REPL tab complete. And someone can define a function called that. And if that's, you know, then you load this with like -- hooks, you know, foo.js with that has those exported functions. Now the user has just written their customized version of REPL tab completion. You know, so it's like it's just a way of registering overrides, patches, you know, filters for input or output. Wherever we want to give users the ability to customize Node, all they have to do is define a function with a specific name, and then Node takes it from there. It's like, okay, I'm going to run this function at this point. Like when this happens internally, you know, tab is pressed in the REPL, I will run your custom REPL tab completion function, you know.
And it's gonna run off thread.
Huh? No,
And it's happen to run off thread.
it's only off thread so far as we know for the like module hooks, like what we currently call loaders, but like tab completion wouldn't necessarily run off thread. It could, but I don't think we have any. We have like I think
I mean,
we know
what, are we gonna parse the file twice?
what?
Are we going to what?
I mean, if we want to read the hook file or the loader file, whatever, I don't think we want to read it more than once. So we have to. I think if it's an if it's off thread, we have to keep it off thread, or we need to
Oh, I understand.
reload it
Okay.
completely.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, whatever. That's a implementation concern, I feel like.
Well, not
No,
technically.
sure,
If we
'cause
already read it. We can pass
it's quite
them.
relevant.
Well, no, yeah, I think so. But when we start up the worker thread, we can pass. So if we've already read it, we can pass the relevant, like hooks or whatever. I forget what it's called, but you can hand things off to the thread and say like, this is now yours. So we've parsed it. We say, here's the load hook, here's the resolve hook. You own these now.
I'm not sure you can transfer functions.
Can you not? Isn't that one of the arguments?
I don't think function works, because how would you, like, if you have a variable in the module, you know, that you want to access it.
What does this have to do with what we name the flag?
Yeah,
Because
so I was
it's all in the
thinking
same
maybe we
file.
can. Sorry,
He's saying if it's all in the same file, we don't want to read the file the first time to get the resolve and load hooks, and which are going to be off. Sorry, we don't want to read the REPL, which are going to be on thread, and then read it a second time when we start up the hook, the worker.
loader.
Sure.
Why not?
Like the
So we
separate
read
thread.
this file once per thread. What difference does it make?
It's twice as much work.
Yeah, but so what?
A bit of a drop in the pond, but I think we can avoid it. Hold on, I need to look up what this thing is called.
Even if we can,
Because-
I still don't see what this has to do with like what we name the
Because
flag.
maybe we need two flags. Is what I'm meaning to. If we have two different things, one which is the loader, another thing that are other hooks. Well, why put it on the same flag if it means we have to parse it twice now? It doesn't seem very efficient.
Okay.
And if we have two flags, maybe one can be loader.
Worker data, isn't this it?
Yeah, look at what it accepts. It doesn't accept functions as far as I know.
It says any. Oh wait, HTML structured code algorithm. Okay, well anyway, we can figure that out later.
I mean, it could also just be like,
Functions. Oh, doesn't work with functions.
like maybe it's not functions at the top level, but it's like at the top level is, you know, something to specify here, look over here for the off thread ones and look over here for the on thread ones. And then it's two other files or two sets of functions or something like that.
Transfer list, here we go.
Why not put it in two different flags? Or at least two different flags, and the user can put the same URL.
Just more stuff for the user to screw up. Because TypeScript is going to want both. Like TypeScript is going to want these off-thread module loading hooks, and it's going to want the on-thread REPL hooks. So you're telling the user now that you have to remember to type both flags, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the REPL is only useful when, well, I mean, yeah, maybe you need both.
But it's not just the REPL, it's also like stack traces and source maps. Those would be probably on thread as well. You know?
Yeah, probably.
So it's a whole, and you don't want to, like, maybe you're not intending to use the REPL with TypeScript right now, but pretty much anytime you're trying to do development with TypeScript, you're going to want stack trace support and source maps.
So couldn't dash require or dash import cover those cases?
No, because that's part of user code. Like
Yeah,
those
but
are,
that's where we want the stack trace to happen anyway.
Well, part of the point of this API is to like register customization in kind of a privileged scope that's before user code has begun executing. You know, like you want to get all your configuration and customization of Node out of the way before the app runs, so that if the first line of the app crashes, you have your custom stack trace already working and so on.
Yeah. Although require runs before user code as well.
But require is part of user code. I mean, like -- require and -- import. That's like saying that like pretend my entry point is my actual entry point, and then in addition put these extra lines of code above it. You know, it's like we're just like providing a way to prepend a little bit of extra JavaScript source.
But in terms of what TypeScript is trying to achieve, that's exactly what they want, right?
Well,
if there's an error happening in error codes.
I mean, for some of these things like stack trace, et cetera, like whether we provide an API to change that at runtime, and then the user just has to be really careful to, I mean, the other problem is that like ESM, you know, starts executing code from the bottom of from the leaves of the tree back. So your entry point is like the last code that runs. So if there's a crash way down in, you know, like say the top of your entry point file is like import shuffle from Lodash, and then inside that like shuffle.js file deep under node modules / Lodash, like maybe there's like sidecar code in there that's like in it, besides the exported shuffle function, there's other code that's at the top level that just runs as soon as, you know, console.log hello, whatever. And that code just runs as soon as that file is evaluated. That shuffle.js file gets evaluated before your entry point gets evaluated. So if your entry point is the one that's registering the pretty stack trace logic, it won't be registered before the crash that happened in shuffle.js. That's the big difference between ESM and CommonJS that people were complaining about at the summit.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason to like, you know,
but require runs before we
require runs like in order, like say because it's synchronous.
Even before we start the ESM parsing. So you wouldn't
argument require.
Sorry?
You're talking about the command line requirement.
dash require. Obviously, if you put it in the main, in your main your entry point, it's not gonna register in time. But if you put it in -- require, it would at least.
Yeah, but then you have to write it in CommonJS, and the whole point is we want like people to be able to do everything in ESM.
Can't -- import do the same thing as
I don't know. That's a good question. Like, is -- import, like, does it get awaited in the sense that like, if say I have -- import and then it like file.js, and within file.js it like registers some custom logic for making a pretty stack trace, would that run and get registered before, like, say the first line of my app is a line that causes a crash? Would that crash then get the pretty stack trace or not because of -- import? I don't know.
Well, how is that different from global preload?
Global preload is like you're giving it like a string of JavaScript to just like inject somewhere.
It does it at the very beginning though, and that stuff will execute before anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like we're trying to provide like intentional APIs for the customizations that people want to do. Like, yeah, they can do all sorts of monkey patching at runtime. They can monkey patch through the resolve hook, but people don't like those solutions. Like they've been dealing with that for the last 10 years with CommonJS, and monkey patching just kind of sucks. So that's why we've been moving in the direction of like diagnostics channel and source maps API and so on to try to give like more particular specific APIs for the customizations people want to do.
Yes, but I'm just saying the dash import, that what you're trying to, or it sounds like what is trying to be achieved with that is exactly
basically.
global preload. Is it
It's
not?
for
Maybe.
maybe the same expectations. Yeah.
Like maybe it's a slightly different flavor, but I think it will, from what you're describing, I think it behaves exactly the same way. Like maybe
I haven't really ever used global preload. I don't remember like the use case that it was created for, but
I feel that's probably everyone except Bradley and me to a tiny extent from watching what Bradley was doing. But I've seen him do things in it, crazy wizardry that sounds exactly like, or looks exactly like what we're talking about here.
it was Jan that made it. It's in the docs, like what its purposes are. I want to say it was like more for
Spoiler, I wrote those docs. I don't. I don't.
Well, I think he wrote the description of that.
So the hook
specific
allows
code.
the return of a string that runs as a sloppy mode script on startup. So it's not like import.